Point. This is what? How to be a great GM. And he's going to talk about being inclusive in your RPGs. Is it necessary? Now, he's going to give his opinion, and I am going to tell you when I disagree, because this great GM, he is going to be hypocritical eventually.
Well, in my case, everything. And here's why. Hello and welcome to this week's episode on how to be a great GM. My name is Guy, and in this episode, it's an incredibly personal episode for me, and it's one that I think if you are one of the people out there who go, why do we need such a thing as gay pride, or gay pride doesn't have any place in role-playing, this video is for you. And if you are someone who was like me, then hopefully this video will help you to find happiness as I did. So
Wow, I'm going to disagree with him here. Gay pride does not belong in Dungeons and Dragons, because it's a non sequitur. Dungeons and Dragons is a kill the monster, get the treasure game. Sexuality really has nothing to do with it. Most guys don't bother with romance in a game which isn't about romance. So sexuality at best is a detail, like eye color or hair color.
So it is a video based on my experiences and my opinions, and that's all there is to say about that. What am I talking about? Well, when you look at the idea of gay pride, it is the notion of celebrating that there are people out there who are different from everybody else, which is an absolute...
You play different characters in the game. That's true. But that doesn't really have anything to do with the game itself. Now, if great GM here starts altering the rules of the game or interfering that way, then it's bad. You know, there's a difference between accepting someone at your table and altering the gameplay. And I'll show eventually he will be talking about altering the gameplay.
Absolutely admirable fact. Whether it's gay pride or people who are green pride or people who have wings and speak like pony pride, it doesn't matter in my opinion. The idea is about accepting others regardless of who or what they are.
Okay, great GM. I'll just call you GM. If you have a group of women, it's rare, but a group of players and a GM, they're all women, and they say, we don't want men at our table. Would you be for that or against it? Now, I know what you are, who you are, and you would probably bow down and say, yeah, that's their preferences. And you'd be all for that. You would have nothing negative to say about that. But men are allowed, they're not allowed to do it. If men said, no, we don't want women at our table, you'd be against that. So there's these double standards that guys have to deal with. Dungeons and Dragons is mainly played by men. I mean, that's just a fact. Anyone who's watching this video, I did a video earlier with this guy, GM, and he had a bunch of 4 women who played the game. They admitted there was almost no women around. And so there's these double standards that people have to deal with. And it's not right.
And that for me is the fundamental message that I really want to send through in this particular video. But what does this have to do with gay pride? Well,
nothing.
When I was growing up as a young gay man, I grew up in a country where electroconversion therapy...
This is unnecessary. We'll get by to where it's more important. You guys can watch his video if you want, if you're curious. But we'll get to what's more important.
But there was one space that I could possibly express who I truly was in, and that was in role-playing. So I will never forget when I was in my first year of university at the tender age of 19 or 20, somewhere around there. Maybe it was my second year. I forget now. It was so long ago. There was a role-playing group that wanted me to join their sessions through a mutual friend. And I was emphatic. And I don't remember exactly why I was so emphatic at that stage, but I was emphatic that they had to know that I was a gay man. And they had to accept that before I would join their group.
Yes, but also you had to worry about the opposite. Like they would have to accept you as a gay man before you could join the group. So this is important to him. That makes sense, but it has nothing to do with RPGs though, because his issue could have been involved any game. It could have been football or tiddlywinks or whatever. So there's really no connection to RPGs.
Now, why was I being so demanding? Why was I forcing this upon these poor people? What evil agenda did I have? I didn't have any evil agenda. I wasn't trying to force anything on anyone. I just wanted to be able to have one space in my world, my real world, where I could just be me. And I didn't have to pretend to be someone else. I didn't have to have false girlfriends or things like that. This is not.
Well, this is good. The thing is, though, Dungeons and Dragons, I mean, it's bad enough that the nerds get it. But basically he's saying, well, these nerds have to pony up, but maybe the jocks don't and the girls don't. You know what I mean? So why pick on RPGs? Anyway, I'm glad he found a group of guys who accepted him as a gay man.
Not a sub story, by the way. This is a celebration because those players went, we don't care what the hell you are. Come and play with us. If you're a good player, you get to stay. If you're a bad player, go away. And I role played with them for the next 12 years until I moved to an even bigger city elsewhere on the planet.
So there's really no connection here other than this is the first group of guys to accept him. It has nothing to do with Dungeons and Dragons or the game or RPGs in general. Not really.
That was an incredibly empowering space. Ironically, or perhaps because
Sorry, I mean, empowering, that's such a low-life feminist term. Maybe freeing would be a better, or accepting, or, comfortable.
I wasn't under any pressure then to be something that I wasn't. I don't think I ever actually played a gay character. I don't recall particularly playing a straight character either.
Exactly. So you're admitting that sexuality has nothing to do with Dungeons and Dragons. So gay pride has nothing to do with the game. Thank you for admitting that. So your video is come to an end.
Because romance wasn't what our GM liked to include, and after a few months of role-playing, I became the default GM, and so then I played everything, and then I could include gay characters and straight characters and everything in between that I just needed as an NPC in my game. But
well, like I said, they're just details. They actually don't affect the gameplay. They're actually not necessary. It's just like saying, hey, this NPC happens to be gay. And they say, okay.
It gave me a space to just sort of be me and explore myself and be comfortable knowing that here are people who don't care and who accept me for who I am. And so I always tried to make sure that my table was then never telling someone to not be who they fundamentally believe themselves to be.
Okay, now this is where it falls off the rails. What do you mean? GM, you don't believe you're a gay man. You know you're a gay man. So if someone comes up and says, I believe that I'm something else, that makes no sense. You either are or you aren't.
Fast forward to a few years ago now, 10 years ago.
By the way, you have limitations. You wouldn't allow anyone, just anyone, to join your table, would you? Right. Would you like a white nationalist, a player who's a white nationalist to join your table? No, you have boundaries. So people, not everyone has to accept you.
And I had a GM who was trying to run a game, and I had a friend of mine, not a close friend, but a friend nonetheless, who wanted to play an anthropomorphic embodiment of basically a furry. A rather interesting character build in terms of that whole thing. But the GM at the table went, no, I don't allow that sort of thing at my table. Keep that away. You are not welcome at the table anymore.
And he had the right to do that. That's his business. The thing is, GM, is that the average D&D game is played by close friends in their own homes. And there's going to be strict boundaries. People don't have to accept everyone else. You don't accept just anybody. Like, what if there was a group of, I'll use the example again, of players that all happen to be white nationalists? I doubt that would be the case. But if there was ever one, you couldn't force them to have, a Jewish person play the game. It would be up to them. It's personal, right? You could have a D&D con where everyone is welcome, but once it's someone's personal home, that ends.
Needless to say, that GM did not GM for me ever again. Why would that sort of restriction be imposed? Why is there that fear that, no, you can't play this, you can't play a cat folk or this or that?
There's all kinds of great reasons. I mean, I myself, at this point in the game, wouldn't allow that. And there's one good, there was a Dragon magazine, I remember years ago, that discussed this, that says, why do you want to be a monster? And one of the reasons, of course, was that you would be more powerful than your fellow players, which is selfish. And another thing was, what's the greatness of the great feeling of finding the exotic in a game if you are already the exotic? And thirdly, there's a case of rewards. When you reach a certain level, you have magical spells that can change your shape and you become the creatures you've been fighting, or you find a magic item that allows you to do it, or you have a specific character class like druids that can alter their form, or you run into a god, or you're reincarnated. There's all these other great things that can allow you to change your shape. So that it ruins that when you can just be one at the beginning. Matter of fact, I don't like Dragonborn at all. I just say, look, rather than you want to be a humanoid dragon, just be a dragon. And of course, that defeats the purpose if you're fighting dragons and you're already one, to start with at the beginning. There's really good reasons why they won't. By the way, GM, you realize that in second edition, they wouldn't allow half orcs. Like the first edition, they had half orcs, and they were the closest thing you could play to a monster. And it really worked. I really liked that because they weren't a full-fledged monster. They were a person with a tinge of monster in them. And that's as far, I agree with that. That's as far as you should go. But why didn't they allow it in second edition? Because the creation of the half orc was basically through rape, right? That would be the majority of the half orc. And so they wouldn't allow that in a game that mostly guys play. So if they're putting that kind of restrictions on guys playing, why shouldn't the average guy who's a GM say, no, I don't want these I'm sorry, I'm screwing up the word, anthropomorphic characters in my game. They have the same rights.
Weird, that's sexually deviant, and I won't have it at my table. I can only assume it is because of an intolerance or a fear that it may influence the person who is against it. It could also simply be a complete misunderstanding. Why would you want to play a toaster? What possible enjoyment would you get out of playing a toaster? Well, I identify with toasters and I want to be a toaster.
That kind of player would annoy the shit out of me. Every game has limitations in order for it to work. Whether it's basketball or chess, D&D only works because there are limitations. The whole point is that you're a member of the fragile human race or demi-human race that has to overcome these threatening monsters. It defeats the purpose if you become one at the beginning. And frankly, it's entitled. And it's juvenile too. Like when we were little kids and we were playing the game, when we're like 10, 11, 12, of course, a lot of us say, I want to be a dragon. But that was tossed out by the time you were 14 and 15.
That is, as far as I can say, not the ridiculousness of being a furry, but the ridiculousness of preventing someone from playing at your table in a make-believe imaginary world simply because you don't understand what it means to them.
Doesn't matter. This is people's preferences. You just earlier gave your opinion like you wouldn't play with this person. So these guys aren't, they're not obligated to just have anyone show up and have these ideas put in. Frankly, I think it detracts from the game. I think it makes it look silly.
So that was a very powerful lesson for me in terms of, no, if you want to come to the table and play this particular type of character, I want to support you and understand why that makes you happy. Because if I'm your friend and that makes you happy, shouldn't I be doing everything in my power to make sure that you remain happy?
Well, you tell me. If I came to you and said, I want to start off with maximum scores. I don't want to roll. I just want to have 18 in it. 18 is the maximum for anyone who doesn't know Dungeons and Dragons. I just want to have 18 in all my ability scores. You can make me happy that way. You would say, no, there are rules that you have to follow in the game. And this guy is going to contradict himself because he's going to put limitations pretty soon on other people's behavior.
Well, there are, of course, certain limits. Now, I will always draw the limit at as long as it doesn't affect any other sentient living being. So
what are you talking about? Who's going to be hurt? It's a game of imagination. All the players and characters and monsters are fictional. So what are you talking about?
Animals, or if you are deciding that people should be executed because of the way they look or the way they talk or the way they think, then you are not welcome at my table.
There you go. He just put limitations on someone. So no one has to accept you, GM, and your ideals. And why not? Why can't a guy say, I play a bloodthirsty character and I want to execute these people? Why can't he? Suppose he plays the villain. He says, I am an evil character and this is what I do. This is the touchy-feely garbage that is being infiltrated by feminists in the game that ruins it for guys. That's its purpose.
So there are lines, and I guess I have to look at it and say, well, is that the same line as saying, well, I don't want gay characters at my table or gay people at my table? And I feel that
there's a giant difference between not wanting gay characters and not wanting gay people. And frankly, guys do have the rights. If they don't want to deal with sexuality, that's their business at their own personal games.
That the primary differentiator, and this I think is something that I feel very personal about, is that if you sit at my table and you want to play someone who hates orcs, but at the same time, you are not telling any other character to hate orcs or any other players to hate orcs.
Okay, now look, what I say at the first, that if it affects the play of the game, then I'm against it. Now, these orcs are fictional bad guys for the good guys to kill. That's their purpose. So, GM, can I ask you something? Are you against zombie movies? Are you against zombie movies where, like The Walking Dead, where they just kill zombies? Let's all feel for the zombies. Let's have a get together and welcome the zombies. No, you see, the movies are fine because both men and women watch movies, right? But because this game is male dominant oriented and dominated, I'll say majority, then all of a sudden you want to like prevent some guy from saying, these orcs are villainous and they want to kill us. So let's kill all orcs. I mean, that's an actual logical way to look at the situation. So who are you to say otherwise?
Where is the harm in saying, well, you can sit at my table and hate orcs? It's a very fine line, and it's one that is incredibly complex and incredibly difficult, because you start going, well, what's the difference between an orc and, let's say, someone of the Jewish faith?
This is bullshit. There's nothing complex about this. There's no fine line. People of the Jewish faith are real, and orcs are fictional. And where the real people can be good and bad, the fictional characters can and have been made to be evil. So the characters can indulge themselves, the players, I should say, and kill them. This is a release for guys, a fantasy for guys. They have a group of villains that they can destroy and get off. Like people go to zombie movies, like I said, and say the zombies are created just to be destroyed. And then you can root for the heroes. So if you're against that, you're against the average guy having a good time playing Dungeons and Dragons. And that's why I can't stand you. That's why I see you as a huge problem to the RPG.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Now there's a line that's suddenly been crossed. So as game masters, we are treading this incredible space of we are either endorsing or we are not endorsing. We are entrenching our own values or we're not entrenching our own values.
You're entrenching your values into a game where other people don't share your values.
Where does the line stop and where does friendship then start? Because I know my friendships around the table are far stronger when everyone is free to be whom they are.
Really? So if someone says, I'm a guy who likes to kill all orcs, he wouldn't be free for that, would he? You would toss him out of your game circle if you had your way. So this is just untrue.
Rather than putting on a mask. So this is not going to be a long video, hopefully, about this whole thing. And I'm not trying to tell you how to run your game.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. You're inserting your values into these games and you're telling people what they should play.
I am simply trying to impress upon you that sometimes allowing someone to be who they are can actually make a huge difference.
You being a gay man does not mean you get to play whatever you like at a table. So this is a bait and switch. You're trying to say someone accepting you as a gay man has to accept your style of gameplay, and they don't.
And I speak now to two players that I had on two separate occasions. They didn't know each other, but they were good friends of mine. I thought I was a good friend of theirs, but there was something that I didn't know and that only came through in role-playing. And one day, this one friend of mine, who was sitting at the table, he turned to me and he said, would it be a problem if he arrived in the next gaming session wearing a woman's blouse?
Okay, this has nothing to do with anything now. You see, it's the bait and switch. He's talking about cross-dressers or whatever.
I think the bottom line is is my experience when it comes to things like pride marches, when it comes to celebrating certain months and saying it's this month or it's that month or it's et cetera, is to not fight it and say, why, where is white pride month, or where is this or where is that? Not turn it political.
You were turning this very political. This has nothing to do with Dungeons and Dragons at all, or RPGs in general. So why are you going on about it? You want to insert your preference of gameplay into everybody else's table. This is so obvious.
But to realize that it is simply about allowing everybody to be who they are and who they want to be, and to not cast any kind of judgment upon them unless they are hurting others, and that's the big thing for me, is to simply say, well, you are who you are, and I love you for you. Now sit down and play our damn game and be free to be you in our game, because it's a fantasy space, and if you can't be yourself in fantasy...
What are you talking about? You just have to be yourself in reality. This whole thing is supposedly by you. Like I say, the bait and switch is saying, we're accepting you as a person, as a player. But that doesn't mean you get to insert that kind of ideas, your lifestyle into the game. People don't owe you that. DMs have a complete right to say, no, I don't want that in my game. You can be yourself. You can show up, like you say, in a dress, and you switch over, but that doesn't mean that character is going to be inserted into my game. So this is the kind of thing. This is we just want to be friends, but you have to play the game by my standards. So don't be fooled by this guy. And again, if there was a group of women, young girls, who didn't want to exclude guys, this loser would be all for it. All of a sudden, those boundaries would have to be respected.
How could you possibly be yourself in reality? We go to fantasy supposedly because that's where we are free to be whatever we want. So we should allow...
Yeah, but you're not allowed to be whatever you want in Dungeons and Dragons, because they have a list of player races that you can play. You can't just start off with anything.
Allow people to do that, I think, anyway, because I know that when my group allowed me to be whom I wanted to be, it was incredibly liberating, and it was as if the world was suddenly no longer just this dark space that hated me for things that I had no control over. I'm not entirely sure what the point of this video was.
I know what it was. I just said what it was. You want to insert your gameplay into other people's tables, whether they like it or not. That's what this video is about. And you do a lot of baiting and switching. So to say, if some DM didn't want sexuality into his games, that'd be the same as not accepting you as a person. That's what's going on here. And you have these double standards. You have people you would accept at your table, but you think other people should accept you. That's what this video you made is about. And it's guys like that, like you, who ruin the game for others. Because again, it's all these double standards. It's all these, you're a low status male who's playing this game. So you aren't allowed boundaries. You're not allowed to have, any kind of limitations for your own personal space. This is pathetic. I hope the average guy, the average nerd who plays Dungeons and Dragons rejects this. So that's all I have to say about this.